Force yourself, do hard things. She typed the resignation letter at 2 in the morning and deleted it before sunrise. Not once. 11 times. Over the course of 7 months. The same letter, written and deleted and rewritten and deleted again, each version slightly different in its specific language and slightly identical in its specific cowardice. Each version representing the same thing, the genuine, desperate, completely real desire to leave the situation that was slowly, quietly, entirely consuming her, and each deletion representing the same thing, the specific, practiced, expertly maintained refusal to force herself to do the hard thing that the situation required. Her name was Priya. She was 34 years old. She was, by every external measure available, doing well. The career was visible and recognized and financially rewarding in ways that the people around her consistently found impressive. She had built, across a decade of genuinely hard work, something that looked from the outside like exactly what a decade of genuinely hard work should produce. From the inside, it was consuming her. Not dramatically. Not in the specific, crisis-shaped way that dramatic stories of professional burnout tend to be told. Quietly. Daily. In the specific, unremarkable, entirely invisible way that the wrong thing consumes you when you have been forcing yourself to remain in it for long enough that the forcing has become the primary activity of your interior life. She was using all of her force on the wrong thing. She was forcing herself to stay when the hard thing, the genuinely, terrifyingly, completely hard thing, was leaving. She was applying every ounce of her considerable self-discipline to the maintenance of a situation that the honest interior had been asking her to leave for 7 months. She was doing hard things every day. But the hard things she was doing were in service of avoiding the hardest thing available. The resignation letter. She found the Stoics through an unusual path. Not through a recommendation or a viral video or the specific cultural moment that sends a lot of people toward these ancient texts. Through a conversation with her grandmother, who was 81 years old and who had spent the previous decade reading voraciously in the specific, unhurried way that people who understand they have limited remaining time read when they have finally found something worth reading. The grandmother pressed a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius into her hands during a Sunday visit and said something that Priya would think about for a very long time afterward. She said, "He writes about forcing himself. About making himself do the things that the comfortable part of him preferred not to do. About getting up when lying down was available. About continuing when stopping was available. About choosing the hard thing deliberately, repeatedly, with the full knowledge that the easy thing was right there and that he was capable of choosing it." She said, "I spent 40 years of my life choosing the easy thing. Not the lazy things. I worked very hard. But I worked very hard on things that were easy for me to work hard on because they did not require me to genuinely face myself. The hard thing, the real hard thing, was always the thing I was avoiding. And I avoided it for 40 years by doing difficult things instead." Priya drove home that evening with the book on the passenger seat and the specific, uncomfortable recognition beginning to form of something that she had not previously been able to name clearly enough to genuinely address. She had been doing hard things for 7 months. None of them were the hard thing. She opened the book that night. She read about Marcus Aurelius forcing himself out of bed in the pre-dawn darkness. About the specific, private, entirely unglamorous daily battle between the part of him that wanted to stay warm and the part of him that understood that the staying warm was the small death of the person he was working to become. About the continuous, renewed, daily requirement to force yourself, genuinely force yourself, with the specific honest acknowledgement that the forcing is necessary because the natural pull is always toward the more comfortable alternative, to do the things that the genuine life requires. She read all night. In the morning, before the sun had risen fully, she opened her laptop. She wrote the resignation letter for the 12th time. She sent it before she could delete it. Not because the fear was gone. The fear was entirely present. In the specific, completely genuine form of someone who has just done the genuinely hard thing and who knows, with absolute clarity, that the consequences are real and the path forward is uncertain and the comfortable familiar is now behind them rather than ahead. but because she had finally understood something that 7 months of writing and deleting and rewriting and deleting had been building toward without quite arriving at. Something that Marcus Aurelius had been writing about in the pre-dawn darkness of the most powerful position in the ancient world because he needed to keep reminding himself of it. The hard thing does not become less hard by being avoided. It becomes more expensive. Every day you do not force yourself is a day the hard thing has grown slightly larger and the force required to do it has grown slightly greater and the specific, accumulating cost of the not doing has grown slightly more. The forcing is not the enemy. The avoiding is. This is what we are exploring today. Completely. With the philosophical depth and the practical urgency and the complete honesty that Priya's 11 deleted resignation letters and her grandmother's 40 years of avoiding the real hard thing make clear this subject deserves. This is Stoic Ascension. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications because every single video here is built for exactly this level of genuine depth and genuine urgency. The kind that produces not just inspiring ideas but the specific interior architecture of someone who has learned to force themselves. What comes after this builds directly on everything you are about to hear. Do not miss what is coming. What forcing yourself actually means, the precise philosophical understanding. The phrase force yourself carries a specific cultural weight that makes genuine engagement with it more difficult than it should be. The word force implies violence, implies the overriding of something that deserves to be honored rather than overcome, implies the specific, punishing relationship with the self that most modern wisdom traditions counsel against. This is not what the Stoics meant. And the misunderstanding of it is among the most consequential available because it allows the person who most needs to force themselves to feel philosophically justified in not doing so. Forcing yourself, in the Stoic understanding, is not violence against the self. It is the specific, decisive exercise of the higher self's authority over the lower self's preferences. The higher self, the specific interior dimension that knows what genuine living requires, that can see the full picture of what the choice means and what it costs and what it builds, exercising genuine governance over the lower self. The specific interior dimension that wants what is immediately comfortable and that will generate endless sophisticated justifications for why the comfortable thing is actually the right thing. Epictetus described this relationship with the specific precision of someone who had been forced, by the external conditions of slavery, to develop the most complete possible version of internal governance. He could not change his external circumstances. Every external dimension of his life was governed by forces outside his control. The only governance available to him was internal. The specific, complete, genuinely exercised authority of the higher self over the lower self's preferences, fears, and impulses. And what he discovered, through the specific, direct, completely unavoidable experience of having to exercise this governance continuously in genuinely extreme conditions, was something that the comfortable person with the comfortable life never has to discover because the comfort makes the discovery unnecessary. The higher self is always capable of governing the lower self's preferences. The capacity is always there. Always available. The force is always available. What is not always present is the decision to exercise it. The forcing is not the struggle to acquire a capacity you do not have. It is the decision to exercise the capacity you have always had but have been allowing the lower self's preferences to override. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this from inside conditions that made the decision genuinely, continuously difficult. Not because he lacked the capacity. Because the lower self's preference for the warm bed and the comfortable inaction and the deferral of the demanding thing to a future moment when the motivation might be more available was genuinely, continuously, powerfully present. And the exercise of the higher self's authority over this preference was genuinely, continuously, daily required. He forced himself. Not because forcing was natural. Because he understood that the alternative, allowing the lower self's preferences to govern, was the specific, daily, accumulating death of the person he was working to become. This is the Stoic understanding of forcing yourself. Not self-punishment. The specific, decisive, daily exercise of the capacity you already have to govern your choices from somewhere higher than immediate comfort. The specific things that are hard, and why they are the most important things available. The hard things are hard for a specific reason that most conversations about doing hard things fail to name precisely enough to be genuinely useful. They are hard not because they are difficult in any objective, universal sense. They are hard because they require something that the comfortable version of the self is specifically designed to avoid providing. Genuine confrontation with the self. The genuinely hard things, the resignation letter sent rather than deleted, the difficult conversation had rather than deferred, the creative work committed to rather than protected behind the comfortable story of not being ready, the genuine risk taken rather than managed into non-existence. These things are hard because each of them requires the specific, honest, confrontational engagement with what you actually are and what you actually want and what you are actually willing to do about both. The comfortable things do not require this. The comfortable things can be done from the same place you are currently standing. They do not require you to move. They do not require you to face yourself. They do not require the specific, demanding, genuinely uncomfortable encounter with the gap between who you currently are and who the hard thing requires you to be in order to do it. The Stoics built their entire philosophical system around the specific recognition that this gap, between the current self and the self the hard thing requires, is not an obstacle to the good life. It is the location of the good life. The good life is not lived in the comfortable territory of the things that require nothing beyond what you currently are. It is lived in the specific, demanding, continuously expanding territory of the things that require you to become something you are not yet. That require the forcing. That require the daily, genuine, honestly difficult exercise of the capacity for governance that the comfortable life never tests. Seneca wrote, "You must be born again." Not in the religious sense. In the specific, practical, entirely demanding philosophical sense of becoming, through the regular engagement with the things that require more than you currently are, something genuinely different from what you currently are. The hard things are the birth canal. Not pleasant. Not optional if the becoming is genuine. Required. The hard thing of beginning. This is perhaps the most universally avoided hard thing available. Not the completion of something difficult, the completion is often the easier part, once the momentum is established. The beginning. The specific, hard, genuinely requiring a force act of starting before you are ready, before the conditions are favorable, before the confidence has arrived that the comfortable self is requiring as a prerequisite for the beginning. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the mornings as the daily version of this. The specific, daily hard thing of beginning the day rather than remaining in the comfortable warmth of the not yet begun. Of forcing the feet to the floor before the motivation arrived because he understood that waiting for the motivation was the specific strategy of the lower self for indefinitely preventing the beginning. The beginning is hard because beginning is irreversible. The moment you begin, you are in it. The comfortable option of not having started is no longer available. And the lower self, which is specifically and expertly organized around the preservation of the comfortable option, resists the beginning with every sophisticated justification available. Not ready. Not the right time. Not enough preparation. Not enough confidence. Not enough certainty about the outcome to justify the risk of beginning. None of these justifications are the truth. They are the lower self's management of the decision to force the beginning. The truth is simpler and more demanding, the beginning is available now, and the forcing of it is the only thing required. The hard thing of continuing. Different in kind from the hard thing of beginning but equal in its requirement of force. The continuing through the specific, extended, genuinely discouraging middle period of any genuine endeavor where the novelty has worn off and the destination is not yet visible and the only available fuel is the discipline that was supposed to be supplemented by the motivation that has temporarily disappeared. This is where most genuine endeavors end. Not at the beginning has its own energy, its own excitement, its own specific motivational force that makes the force of the decision feel less necessary because the wanting is temporarily sufficient. The continuing through the middle period requires the specific, genuine, daily exercise of force that the beginning did not require. The forcing of the engagement with the work when the engagement is not naturally available. The forcing of the return to the practice when the practice has stopped feeling productive. The forcing of the continued movement in the direction when the direction has stopped feeling alive with the specific energy that initially made it compelling. Epictetus taught his students that the person who cannot continue through the middle period has not genuinely decided. Has made the initial decision but has not made the continuous, renewable, daily decision that genuine commitment requires. Has confused the wanting of the destination with the choosing of the path, and has discovered, in the middle period where the wanting is temporarily insufficient, that the choosing requires more force than the wanting ever needed. Force the continuing. Not once. Daily. Through the full length of the middle period. This is where the genuine thing is built. The hard thing of finishing. This is the least discussed of the three hard things and possibly the most consequential. The specific, hard, requiring of force act of actually completing the thing rather than maintaining it in the comfortable state of almost finished that preserves the possibility of it being good without requiring the exposure of what it actually is. The almost finished thing cannot be judged. Cannot fail. Cannot disappoint. Cannot be met with the specific, feared response that the completion and the exposure that follows it would make possible. The comfortable self understands this with extraordinary sophistication. And it produces, in the person who is most afraid of the judgment that genuine completion makes possible, the specific pattern of the perpetually almost finished thing. The project that is always in progress. The work that is always being refined. The direction that is always being prepared for but never actually taken. Force the finishing. The completion. The actual sending of the actual work into the actual world where it will receive the actual response that the comfortable self has been managing to avoid. This exposure is the hard thing. It is also the thing that makes everything else that follows possible. Nothing is built from the almost finished thing. Everything is built from the completed, exposed, genuinely finished thing that the forcing of the completion made real. The hard thing of the honest self-confrontation. This is the hardest of all the hard things. The specific, required of force, genuinely demanding engagement with what the honest account of yourself actually reveals. Not the comfortable self-assessment. Not the story that makes the current situation reasonable and the current choices defensible and the current life a coherent expression of genuine values. The honest self-confrontation. The specific, courageous, philosophically necessary act of seeing yourself as you actually are rather than as the story you have been telling requires you to appear. This is what Marcus Aurelius was doing in his private journals. Forcing himself into the honest confrontation with what the day had actually contained. Not the flattering version. Not the version that the emperor's position would have justified claiming. The honest version. The specific, demanding, completely private engagement with the gap between who he was working to become and who the day's actual choices had expressed. Force this. Daily. With the specific, patient, honest courage of someone who understands that the self that is not honestly confronted is the self that does not genuinely develop. That the comfortable self-image, maintained by the avoidance of honest confrontation, is the specific mechanism through which genuine growth is indefinitely prevented. Why most people avoid the hard things, the specific mechanisms of avoidance. Understanding why the hard things are so consistently avoided is necessary for genuinely addressing the avoidance. Because the avoidance does not announce itself as avoidance. It announces itself as wisdom, as patience, as the appropriate reading of conditions, as the responsible assessment of readiness. The specific, sophisticated camouflage of avoidance as something reasonable is one of its most effective mechanisms for perpetuating itself unexamined. The mechanism of preparation as permanent prerequisite. The preparation is real. Genuine preparation for genuinely demanding things has genuine value. The practice before the performance. The study before the engagement. The specific, deliberate development of the capacity the hard thing requires before the hard thing is attempted. But the preparation that never ends, the preparation that functions not as the development of genuine capacity but as the indefinite postponement of the hard thing until conditions that will never be fully met are fully met, this preparation is avoidance wearing preparation's clothing. The comfortable self is extraordinarily skilled at generating genuine sounding reasons why the preparation is not yet complete. Why one more element needs to be in place. Why the conditions are almost but not quite right for the beginning. Why the readiness that the hard thing requires is almost but not quite present. Force the beginning before the preparation is complete. The genuine preparation for most genuinely hard things occurs primarily through the doing of them rather than through any amount of preparation that precedes the doing. The readiness arrives after the beginning, not before. The mechanism of timing is permanent obstruction. Timing is real. Genuine strategic assessment of when the hard thing is most likely to produce the desired outcome has genuine value. Not all moments are equally appropriate for all actions. But the timing that is always slightly off, the assessment that consistently finds the current moment marginally less appropriate than the future moment that will be slightly more appropriate, this timing assessment is avoidance wearing strategic wisdom's clothing. The comfortable self is specifically expert at the timing assessment that consistently finds the current moment inadequate. There is always a reason why now is not quite right. The circumstances are almost aligned but not quite. The conditions are improving but not yet optimal. The moment is approaching but not yet fully arrived. Force the action now. In the conditions that actually exist. With the timing that is actually available. Because the perfect timing is not coming. The conditions will never be fully optimal. The moment that the comfortable self is requiring to be present before the hard thing can begin will always be displaced by a slightly better moment that the next assessment will reveal is not quite arrived. The mechanism of fear of the outcome is permanent paralysis. The fear is real. Genuine uncertainty about the outcome of the genuinely hard thing is genuine and the discomfort it produces is genuine. The resignation letter might not lead to anything better. The creative work might be rejected. The relationship risk might not be reciprocated. The direction chosen might not produce the destination anticipated. These fears are legitimate. The outcomes are genuinely uncertain. The comfortable self is not wrong that the uncertain outcome is possible. But the fear of the uncertain outcome, when it functions not as the appropriate assessment of genuine risk but as the permanent paralysis that prevents any action whose outcome is not guaranteed, this fear is avoidance wearing appropriate caution's clothing. Force the action in the presence of the genuine uncertainty. The Stoic practice is precisely this: act from genuine values in the genuine presence of genuine uncertainty about the outcome. Not with the certainty that the outcome will be favorable. With the specific, philosophical, values-grounded recognition that the quality of the action is yours to control and the outcome is not. And that the action, taken from genuine values in genuine uncertainty, is the only thing genuinely available to you. The guaranteed favorable outcome was never available. The action was always available. The mechanism of comfort as legitimate priority. This is the most seductive of all the mechanisms because it has the most legitimate sounding philosophical support. Rest is necessary. Self-care is important. The sustainable practice requires the preservation of the energy that genuine effort consumes. Comfort is not the enemy. The rejection of all comfort in favor of continuous forcing is not wisdom. It is performance. All of this is true. And none of it addresses the specific, daily, individually small but cumulatively enormous pattern of choosing comfort when the hard thing is available and the only genuine obstacle to choosing the hard thing is the preference for comfort. The Stoics did not counsel the elimination of comfort. They counseled the specific, philosophically precise, daily maintained governance of the relationship between the preference for comfort and the requirement of genuine living. The recognition that comfort is appropriate in its place and that its place is not every moment where the hard thing is available and the comfortable alternative is more immediately attractive. Force the hard thing when the hard thing is what the genuine life requires. Rest when rest is genuinely what the life requires. The distinction between these two is the specific, daily, honestly assessed, philosophically grounded practice that genuine self-governance makes possible. The Stoics who forced themselves, what they built. The Stoic philosophical tradition is not built on theory. It is built on the specific, direct, personally costly practice of people who forced themselves through genuinely hard things and who built, through the forcing and through the things the forcing produced, something that 2,000 years of subsequent human history has found genuinely worth preserving. Epictetus forced himself to think with complete philosophical precision from inside the most genuinely constrained conditions available. He did not wait for better conditions. He did not defer the philosophical work to a future moment when freedom from external constraint would make the work more natural. He forced the work in the conditions that existed. And the work he forced in those conditions produced a philosophical contribution of genuinely extraordinary depth and durability. He could have waited. He had every legitimate reason to wait. The conditions were genuinely hostile to the work. The forcing was genuinely difficult in ways that the comfortable philosopher working in favorable conditions does not encounter. He did not wait. He forced. Marcus Aurelius forced himself out of bed in the pre-dawn darkness every morning of his imperial life. He wrote about this with the specific, honest, completely unembellished acknowledgement that the forcing was required. That the preference for the warm bed was genuine and continuously present. That the decision to force the rising was a genuine decision, made genuinely against a genuine preference, every single morning. The most powerful person in the ancient world forced himself out of bed every morning because he understood that the alternative, allowing the preference for comfort to govern the morning, was the specific, small, daily death of the person he was working to become. Seneca forced himself to write with the specific, sustained, genuine philosophical engagement that the quality of his letters to Lucilius required across decades of correspondence. He forced himself to think clearly and honestly about the hardest questions available to a human being, the questions of how to live and what to value and how to face the mortality that was continuously and very personally present in his life, and to express what the honest thinking produced with the specific, demanding precision that genuine philosophical writing requires. He forced the writing when not forcing it would have been entirely available. He forced the thinking when comfortable thoughts were continuously on offer. He forced the honest engagement with the hard questions when the comfortable avoidance of them was the ambient cultural norm of the society he inhabited. And what the forcing produced, across decades of continuous, genuinely demanding, honestly maintained philosophical work, is what you are engaging with right now. 2,000 years after the forcing occurred. This is what forcing yourself builds. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Over the genuine time that genuine forcing across genuine difficulty genuinely requires. It builds the specific, enduring, completely irreplaceable thing that the avoiding of the hard thing has never once built in the entire history of the human beings who have chosen avoiding over forcing. The specific daily practices of forcing yourself, what they look like and what they build. Forcing yourself is not a single act of dramatic will. It is a practice. A daily, ongoing, specifically maintained practice of choosing the hard thing in the specific moments where the comfortable thing is simultaneously available and more immediately attractive. The practice of the forced beginning, the most important daily practice available. Every single day provides the specific opportunity of the forced beginning. The morning as the daily rehearsal of the most fundamental practice. The specific, daily decision to begin, to rise, to engage, to start the work, to face the day from the direction of genuine values rather than from the direction of the preference for the continued warmth of the not yet begun. Marcus Aurelius returned to this practice with the specific consistency of someone who understood that the daily forced beginning was the foundation of everything else that the day's genuine engagement required. Not the grand decision. The small one. Rise. Now. Before the preference for the comfortable has had time to generate the next sophisticated justification for remaining. The practice is this: when the moment of the forced beginning arrives, when the alarm sounds, when the work is available, when the hard thing is present and the comfortable alternative is equally present, force the beginning without negotiation. Without the internal conversation between the higher self and the lower self that the lower self will always win if the conversation is long enough. Without the consideration of the reasons that the comfortable alternative is providing for itself. Begin. Force the beginning. Before the negotiation. In the moment is available. This practice, maintained daily, builds something that nothing else builds. The specific, accumulating, evidence-based confidence of someone who begins. Who does not defer and negotiate and consider. Who forces the beginning when the beginning is available and who therefore has, across the months and years of the daily forced beginning, actually begun far more than the person who waits for the beginning to feel natural. The practice of the forced continuation. Every genuine endeavor reaches the specific, genuinely difficult point where the natural momentum of the beginning has dissipated and what remains is the specific, honest, completely unglamorous requirement to force the continuation. The practice is the specific, daily decision to return to the work even when the return is not motivated by the natural energy that the beginning provided. To force the sitting down with what was left unfinished yesterday. To force the engagement with the part of the project that the comfortable self has been finding increasingly good reasons to defer to the next session. Not for hours of forced, resentful engagement that produces nothing genuine. For the specific minimum viable engagement that genuinely reconnects the interior with the direction of the work. Sometimes 30 minutes of forced continuation is enough to restore the genuine engagement that the forcing was required to initiate. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes the entire session is forced and produces nothing that feels alive. Force it anyway. Not because forced engagement always produces its best work. Because the habit of forcing the return, of being someone who returns to the work even when the returning is genuinely difficult, is the specific habit that makes the completion of genuinely long endeavors possible. And genuinely long endeavors are where everything worth building lives. The practice of the forced honest accounting. The most important and the most consistently avoided daily practice of forcing yourself is the specific, evening, genuinely honest accounting of where the forcing was exercised and where the comfortable alternative was chosen instead. Not the comfortable self-assessment that confirms the story. The genuinely honest one. The specific, patient, unflinching examination of the day's actual choices against the standard of the person the forcing is working to build. Where was the beginning forced and where was it deferred? Where was the continuation forced and where was the comfortable stopping point honored instead? Where was the honest confrontation with the self engaged and where was the comfortable version of the self-assessment substituted for it? This accounting is itself a hard thing. It requires the specific, genuinely difficult honesty of seeing yourself as you actually were in the day's actual choices rather than as the story about the day would prefer you to appear. It requires the forcing of the honest seeing when the comfortable seeing is continuously available and considerably more pleasant. Force it. Daily. With the specific, patient, honest courage of someone who understands that the accurate map of where the forcing is working and where it is not is the most valuable available resource for making tomorrow's forcing more targeted and therefore more productive than today's. The practice of the forced vulnerability. This is the hardest of all the specific daily practices of forcing yourself. The specific, daily, requiring of maximum force act of expressing what is genuinely true rather than what is comfortable, safe, or what the social environment expects. The forced honest conversation rather than the comfortable avoidance. The forced genuine expression of what you actually think rather than the managed performance of what the room wants to hear. The forced vulnerability of genuinely asking for what you need rather than performing the self-sufficiency that avoids the specific exposure of needing. Each of these forced vulnerabilities is hard in the specific way that all genuine exposure is hard. They require the forcing precisely because the comfortable alternative is always the option of non-exposure. Of staying behind the managed presentation. Of not risking the specific consequence that genuine expression makes possible. Force the expression. Force the vulnerability. Force the honest conversation. Not because the consequences of doing so are guaranteed to be favorable. Because the specific interior quality that the forcing of genuine vulnerability builds, the practice capacity for genuine expression without the management of the comfortable alternative, is the specific quality that makes genuine relationship, genuine creative work, and genuine self-knowledge possible. The practice of the forced physical challenge. The Stoics practiced voluntary physical hardship with the specific, deliberate understanding that the relationship between the body and the interior is not one-directional. The body that is regularly forced through genuine physical challenge develops something in the interior that the comfortably managed body does not develop. The specific, practiced, embodied knowledge that genuine difficulty can be met and continued through. That the body's signals of distress, the signals that the comfortable alternative is available and would immediately address the distress, are not commands but information. That the forcing of the continuation past the point where the body is suggesting stopping builds the specific interior evidence of genuine capacity under genuine pressure that comfortable conditions cannot provide. Practice forcing the physical challenge. The workout extended past the comfortable stopping point. The cold that is felt rather than immediately managed. The hunger that is sustained past the comfortable resolution of it. The physical effort that continues into the territory where the body is providing its most convincing case for stopping. Not to harm. To build the specific, embodied knowledge of what genuine forcing through genuine difficulty produces. Which is the most convincing available evidence that the forcing is possible and that what is beyond a comfortable stopping point is not destruction but capacity. What the forced life produces, the complete transformation. Priya sent the resignation letter. The consequences were real and specific and not without genuine difficulty. The transition period was genuinely uncertain in ways that the comfortable situation had been protecting against. The specific, new, genuinely uncertain direction she moved toward in the months after the sending required more forcing, more daily, genuinely demanded, honestly difficult exercise of the capacity for governance, than anything the previous decade had required. She did not regret sending it. Not once. Not even in the specific, difficult moments of the transition when the comfortable familiar was the loudest available option. Because something had been built in the sending that 11 months of writing and deleting had not built. Something that the forcing of the genuinely hard thing produces and that the avoidance of it cannot produce regardless of how many other hard things are done in its place. The specific, direct, completely genuine knowledge of what she was actually capable of when the forcing was real. When the hard thing was not the theoretical hard thing discussed in professional settings and applied to other people's lives. When it was her resignation letter, her fear, her forcing, her hard thing actually sent. This knowledge, genuinely hers, drawn from genuine experience rather than comfortable theory, is what the forced life produces that the avoiding life cannot produce. Not the specific outcome that the forcing produces. The specific interior quality of the person who has genuinely forced themselves through genuinely hard things and who has discovered, through the direct experience of the discovering, that the forcing was possible and that what it produced was more genuinely valuable than the comfortable alternative that was continuously available and that was continuously not chosen. Marcus Aurelius built this across decades. Epictetus built it in the most constrained conditions available. Seneca built it in the proximity of genuine mortal danger. Priya built it in 7 months of written and deleted letters and one finally sent. You are building it right now. In the specific, available, completely genuine present moment of deciding whether the next hard thing, whatever it is, wherever it lives in the specific territory of your specific life, is going to be forced or avoided. Force it. Not because it is pleasant. Because it is the only available path to the person you are genuinely capable of becoming. Because the comfortable alternative, however continuously available and however genuinely attractive, has never once built anything that the forcing of the genuine thing has built. Because the forcing is the practice. And the practice is the path. And the path, walked daily with the specific, honest, genuinely demanding exercise of the capacity for genuine self-governance, leads to the only destination worth arriving at. The genuine self. Expressed fully. In the specific, real, completely alive way that only the regular, deliberate, honestly maintained forcing of the genuinely hard things makes possible. Force yourself. Do the hard things. Not eventually. Now. Subscribe to Stoic Ascension right now. Turn on your notifications. Every single video on this channel is built for exactly this depth and exactly this urgency. The kind that produces not the comfortable confirmation that hard things are important but the specific, practically applicable, genuinely demanding understanding of what forcing yourself through hard things actually requires and what it actually builds in the person willing to do it. What comes after this builds directly on everything you just heard. Every video goes deeper. Every video takes the practice further into the complete understanding of what the genuine life, the forced life, the hard things life, the life that does not wait for the conditions to be more comfortable before the genuine engagement begins, actually produces and what it actually feels like from the inside. Priya deleted the letter 11 times. She sent it on the 12th. Not because the fear was gone. Because she finally understood that the fear was not going to leave before the sending. That the sending was the only available thing that would make the fear irrelevant. She forced herself. And what the forcing built was worth every one of the 11 deletions that preceded it. Your hard thing is waiting. The comfortable alternative is right there. Force yourself. Now.